Hello horror hounds and welcome to a new video from Hayley's Horror Reviews. Like many of you guys, I was eagerly anticipating the new Arrow video release of the House box set. So to give you a little bit of context, House is a 1985 low-budget horror film directed by Steve Miner, who had directed Friday the 13th Part 2 and 3. He'd also been an associate producer on Last House on the Left. The movie was also produced by Sean S. Cunningham, who is best known for directing the original Friday the 13th and had also produced Last House on the Left. So at the time when House was released in 1985, the genre was saturated by slasher movies, and Sean S. Cunningham decided he wanted to do something different. So that's how House all came about. So the new box set, which I'll show you right now, which most of you probably own in your horror collections, but this really does take us back to the VHS era of horror. So that's the cover there, which is absolutely beautiful, and in the box set, it includes the 4 House films. I wasn't really aware that it had many sequels. I heard of House 2, The Second Story. However, there was 2 more sequels. There's House 3, The Horror Show, which was released in 1989, and then House 4, Repossession in 1992. So it covered like a significant period of the genre. Obviously, you know, it peaked with its slasher films in the 80s, and then horror went through a bit of a gradual decline in the early 90s, but there's still quite a lot of VHS era gems out there for sure. So included in this box is the 4 films. They're really nice slim Blu-rays, so that's really cool, really slick. And it also includes a companion book, which is a really awesome read. And this is written by Simon Barber, who is a huge fan of House, and he even runs a website, and yeah, he covers a lot of ground in this book, so I totally recommend you read that. So to give you guys some context of my particular interest in this series of films, when I was growing up, I always noticed the cover for House in the VHS store. So basically, the original cover had a severed hand ringing a doorbell with the tagline, "Ding dong, you're dead." I was instantly sold. And I think that House, for me, is particularly significant because it was the film that really interested me in low-budget horror films, all those kind of strange B-movies, you know, films that were a bit DIY, not so glossy, like Hollywood pictures and stuff like that. So it had been a number of years since I'd watched House, and thankfully to this box set, I rewatched the original movie, and I had a very different reaction from what I initially had. When I first saw House, I genuinely thought, as charming as it was one of the worst films I had ever seen. It was to do with the rubbery special effects, which I think are absolutely endearing, to be honest now. But since then, I have seen so many terrible films that kind of outdo House, and in fact, I don't actually think House is a terrible film at all. So House opens up with the apparent suicide of an elderly lady, and then we fast forward to her funeral where we meet her nephew Roger Cobb, who's played by William Catt. He's best known for playing the part of Tommy Ross in Brian De Palma's Carrie. So he's played quite an iconic role. That's what he's best known for on the horror scene. So he is a horror writer. He's found some success there. There's this excellent scene where he's doing a signing and you've got like all these like crazy fans, and it's like it's very like close up when they're approaching him and they come across as really obnoxious, and that's a pretty funny scene. So we get to know a little bit about him. However, his next book is actually coming from more of a personal perspective. He is writing about his experiences within the Vietnam War. So he decides to go back and live in the home he grew up in, which was his aunt's home. He wants to find out a little bit more about her suicide. He sees her ghost there, and she warns him, "No, this house, you know, it will get to you. I thought it would never get to me, but it did." So that obviously explains the suicide. We also discover that Roger's son drowned in the garden swimming pool, and he mysteriously vanished. I did think there was a little bit of connection there with Jason Voorhees, actually, because considering the director is, he was the one who brought Jason to life, essentially, the Jason we know with the mask, but obviously there's the context of the drowning, so I thought that was a kind of nice homage to and kind of link in there with Friday the 13th, but I could be wrong, but that's what I interpreted from that. Yeah, he's also divorced, so his ex-wife is estranged from him, and yeah, he's in the house because he is trying to get this book off the ground. And then strange occurrences start happening, and that is when the fun of House truly begins, because you've got all these incredible practical effects, the stop motion animation. It honestly looks so fake, but it's so good, and it is kind of that embodiment of what 80s horror was all about. It's that magic of those, rubbery practical effects, not all this kind of glossy CGI. There are a few genuine jump scares in there, but I think overall for a modern audience, it's not a particularly scary film, but it's a really interesting film because I think it stands out on its own, and it's pretty unique in what it does. So that's pretty fantastic. Another cool fact about the House franchise is Kane Hodder, who's obviously best known from playing Jason Voorhees from Part 7 up until Jason X, did some stunt work on House. So it's one of his earlier horror roles, it was pretty cool to discover that. So yeah, my reaction to House was totally unexpected. I actually really enjoyed rewatching the movie, and it's completely different to what I remember it. I remember two specific scenes which I think are brilliant. The one where the fish comes alive, and when Roger gets the vision of his ex-wife turning into this horrible witch monster, and it's actually really quite funny as well. It's funnier than what I remember. I think I had it in my mind that House was one of these movies that was intentionally meant to be a good movie, but turned out completely wrong, like a bit of a Troll 2 situation. But it's actually not at all. So House is definitely a genuine horror comedy. I think everything in there is intended, from the kind of hammy effects, the campiness of it. It's all there, and it does strike up some genuine laughs. And I think, interestingly, at this point in the mid-80s, I think we needed more films like that. Horror comedy was on the rise. Obviously, you had the exceptional American Werewolf in London earlier in the decade. And I think it came at a point when there was too many slasher movies, too many of them maybe took themselves a bit too seriously, but this comes out as it's a film that is also funny. It's very farcical, because the situations Roger gets himself into, something always steps in to get in his way when he's trying to figure out what's happening with the house, with these monsters, and trying to defeat them. There is his curious and nosy neighbour Harold, played by George Wendt, who is brilliant, and a brilliant foil for him, because he always kind of steps in at the wrong moments, but then goes and helps him, which is really cool. There's also his neighbour, this really attractive woman, and then she kind of bombards him by asking him to babysit her child, and then obviously shenanigans kick off there again, and he's got to rescue this child from the monsters, and there's a scene going up a chimney. It's just genuinely really farcical, really just good, really good fun and an entertaining film. It's just totally different to how I remembered it. I just remember it being like, no, this is one of the genuinely worst films I've ever seen. But actually it's not, and I completely enjoyed it for what it was, and I think it's got an endearing charm to it. So I'm planning to review the complete set, so this complete set here. So I've never seen House 2 to 4 in my life, so this is just going to be coming from first viewing reactions, rather than this video is a bit different because I had seen House many moons ago. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you'd like to see me review more horror movies on camera, just, comment, let me know, and check out Hayley's Horror Reviews on Facebook, and I'm at Welsh Demoness on Twitter, and Miss Hayley R 1989 on Instagram, so you can check out all my stuff. I basically talk about horror movies non-stop, basically daily. So if you love horror, if you have an appreciation for low budget horror, for old school horror, any type of horror, I'm there to discuss that with you guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. And if you have got a copy of Arrow's house box set, then I hope you enjoy some binge watching.